Stargirl Chapter 28. Her parents met us in the lobby of the hotel where Susan, Mr. McShane, and I each had a room for the night. After we checked in, the five of us ate a buffet lunch in the hotel restaurant. Then we watched Susan board a bus that would take her and 18 other contestants to Phoenix West High School. There were 38 contestants. 19 had already given their speeches that morning. By the end of the afternoon, 10 finalists would be chosen. The finals would take place that evening. To be honest, none of us were surprised that Susan made the cut. She was incredibly good. The surprise was this. Her speech was new. It was not the one she had been practicing for weeks in front of me and Peter Sienkiewicz and assorted saguaros. It was not the one I had heard just the day before, but it was wonderful. There were some elements of the old speech in it, and much that was as new as that morning. Like a butterfly, her words fluttered from image to image. She swung from the distance past, Barney, Archie's Paleocene rodent skull, to the present, Cinnamon, to the distant future, the death of the sun. From the most ordinary here, the old man nodding off on the bench at Tudor Village, to the most extraordinary there, a newly discovered galaxy 90% to the end of the universe. She touched on silver lunch trucks and designer labels and enchanted places, and when she said her best friend gave her pet rat a ride on his shoulder, tears came to my eyes. It was a jumble, it was a mismatch, and somehow she pulled it all together. Somehow she threaded every different thing through the voice of a solitary mockingbird singing in the desert. She called her speech, I might have heard a moa. The auditorium was half full, mostly of small groups of students and parents from the competing schools. After a contestant finished, his or her supporters whistled and whooped as if doing so would influence the judges. The rest was polite applause. When Susan finished, the four of us managed a modest cheer, but that was about it. No whistles, no whoops. I think we were made of more timid stuff than the speechmaker herself. Back at the hotel, Mr. McShane and I mobbed her, if two can be a mob. Her parents were more reserved. They were full of smiles and well done's, but they seemed no more surprised at her success than Susan did. When the adults went off to the gift shop, I had her to myself. I said, "Where did that come from?" She grinned. "Did you like it?" "Sure, but it's not what I've been hearing for the last month. What were you doing, practicing a secret speech on the side?" The grin got wider. "Nope. That was the first time I heard it, too." I stared at her. Slowly her words sank in. "Let me get this straight. You're saying you just made it up this morning?" "I'm saying I didn't even make it up. It was just there. All I did was open my mouth and let it out." She held both hands out to me and snapped her fingers. Presto. I gaped at her. "What are you going to say tonight?" She threw out her arms. "Who knows?" The five of us ate an early dinner in the hotel restaurant. Afterwards, we waited in the lobby while Susan changed clothes. She stepped off the elevator wearing a peach-colored pantsuit. She slinked across the lobby, modeling for us. She sat on her mother's lap and said, "My personal seamstress made it for me." We applauded lightly and sent her off on the bus. The general public was invited to the evening show, and the auditorium was packed. People stood in back. Down front, a high school orchestra played rousing music by John Philip Sousa. The 10 contestants sat on stage. 7 were boys. All of the contestants appeared to be grim and nervous, stiff as mannequins, except for Susan, who was bending the ear of the boy sitting next to her. He nodded occasionally, but kept his eyes and spine at attention, and obviously wished that she would shut up. Susan's parents chuckled knowingly at her behavior, while I tried to disguise a stab of jealousy. One by one, the contestants took the long walk to the center stage to give their speeches. The applause was equally hearty for all. A grade school girl in a frilly white dress handed each contestant a bouquet of roses, yellow for the girls, red for the boys. While the girls cradled their roses, the boys looked at them as if they were hand grenades. Susan was next to last to speak. When her name was called, she bounced up from her chair and practically ran to the microphone. She did a sprightly pirouette, a curtsy, waved her hand in the window washer motion, and said hi. Accustomed to seeing stiff, mortified contestants, the audience responded with uncertain titters. They didn't know what to make of this unconventional teenager any more than we had on the first day of school. Several bold souls said hi and waved back. She did not begin, at least not in the usual sense. There was no ringing preamble. She merely stood there, comfortably chatting away as if we were all on rocking chairs on her front porch. Murmur drifted toward the ceiling. People were waiting for her to get started. The murmur subsided as it occurred to him that this was it, and they were missing it. The quiet that then fell over the auditorium was absolute. I was more tuned in to the audience than the speaker, and if, for the last 5 minutes of her talk, anyone was breathing, I could not detect it. When she finished with a barely whisper, "Can you hear it?" and leaned with her cupped hand to her ear, 1,500 people seemed to inch forward, straining to hear. There were 10 seconds of pure stillness, and then she turned abruptly and went back to her chair. Still, there was no reaction. What's going on, I wondered. She sat forward in her chair, her hands folded primly in her lap. And then it came, suddenly, explosively, as if everyone had awakened at once. We were all on our feet, clapping, shouting, and whistling. I found myself sobbing. The cheering was as wild as that of a crowd at a championship basketball game.